Hello, everyone. Good evening. They are trying to kill the story. They are trying to kill the story, whether it be big tech or whether it be big media. They simply do not want you to know about the money that Joe Biden's son, Hunter, was looking to make off of China and did make off of Ukraine. This despite this explosive new evidence from the New York Post. They're shutting it down. And you know what? We deserve more, right? We deserve to know what exactly happened. We deserve to know why. They ought to be asking Joe Biden some of these questions. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I am Trish Regan, and this is the Trish Regan Show. The mainstream media is still refusing to question Joe Biden. Still refusing on these stunning revelations that have come to us courtesy of the New York Post. So we watch these dueling town halls, remember? Last night, one on ABC led by the former Clinton staffer, and one on NBC where the anchor was so highly criticized for even just agreeing to talk to the president in a town hall format in the first place, right? So she had to double down and be super aggressive because they were so mad at her for even talking to him. And yet, in the entire 90-minute town hall there over on ABC, the former Clinton staffer moderating the whole thing completely avoided the elephant in the room, refused to ask the former vice president about his son's attempt there to sell his connections to the tune of $10 million a year. Hello, everyone. It's great to see you tonight. Michael, welcome. Happy Friday to you. Hello, Peter in New Jersey. Mike, hello. Aaron Heino, great to see you. We have a few more people joining us again from China, and I say every single time, I'm so impressed because I know what you guys go to actually watch all of this. And by the way, I feel for you right now because we're going through something sort of similar right here in the US right now. We have big social media companies trying to basically suppress this story, right? So Joe Biden's son getting $10 million a year, that's what he's negotiated anyway. It turns out that the guy he negotiated it with wound up just sort of missing a couple years ago. He was highly connected to the CCP's intelligence and military arms, and he ran one of China's biggest energy companies, which reportedly went bankrupt, and well, that may not have ended so well for him. We don't really know what the answer is. But he meets with this guy. They work out some alleged deal to the tune of 10 times 3, $10 million, 3 years. Yeah, that's one of the revelations here that's getting shut down. And you know what? I'm happy if you're watching this live right now because I guarantee you they're going to probably strip this. They will suppress it. They are shadow banning all of these stories right now. Anyway, this email that was uncovered, you've got Hunter Biden talking about how he's going to work with this Chinese gentleman, former head of the major energy company there with ties to the CCP, as I mentioned, offered $10 million a year, 3-year deal for, quote, introductions. Wow, that's good work if you can get it, huh? And this wasn't all, right? The email revelations included emails back and forth between Hunter Biden and the Ukrainian energy executive at Burisma, which suggest that Hunter Biden orchestrated a meeting between his father, who's then the vice president of the United States in charge of Ukraine policy, and the executive of the company whose board Hunter was on. I mean, there's actually a thank you note here from the executive. Good to see you all, guys. Mike, welcome. Good to have you here. Lou, welcome. Good to see you. Kegel, good to see you. John as well. Yeah, take down the CCP. It's something I think that would be much appreciated by many people in the world. Anyway, so when Joe Biden's out there saying he has no knowledge of his son's business, and that's exactly what he said about a year ago in an interview. He said, no knowledge of this, never knew anything about it. Well, you know what? It is clear that is a misleading statement at best. And I'm being generous. And yet the story is being shut down. Anyone who dares to talk about this, anyone who shared this story on Twitter, the New York Post story, who reported this out, they got their Twitter account shut down. The Trump campaign itself, just days ahead of an election, gets its Twitter account locked because it dared to share this story that was reported out by the New York Post. Facebook is preventing the story from being shared. I mean, what is going on? Are we China? Did we just wake up and become China? Or maybe the former Soviet Union? Because it's sure feeling that way. Why does Jack Dorsey get to decide what is news and what is not? Why should YouTube or Facebook or any of these other platforms decide what is news and what is not? A reminder, by the way, make sure you go to TrishIntel.com. That's my brand new website. I'm so proud of it. Sign up for my emails. Sign up for my emails. Sign up for the podcast, because this is the way that we can communicate with each other and not have it broken down. In fact, at some point, I'm going to introduce a subscription content product that I'll bring to you guys right away as soon as I can, because I don't want anybody getting in the way of this, right? Which is exactly what they're trying to do. And I'm going to give you examples. So every time I appear on this YouTube channel right now, shortly thereafter, the company goes in, YouTube does, and tries to demonetize these videos and says, well, you know, you can't actually have any advertising on them. The other night, after the vice presidential debate between Kamala Harris, remember, and Mike Pence, I was pretty complimentary, frankly, to Kamala Harris. I was complimentary to Susan Page, who moderated the thing. I've moderated 2 Republican presidential debates myself. And so I came on, I was live with you, we talked about it. I was pretty darn fair. And like I said, complimentary to Kamala Harris, although I fundamentally disagree with the policy, right? Because she's talking about, in my view, taking our country in a socialist redistribution of wealth model, as opposed to Pence's view, which is much more supply side economics. And so I said, look, you know, the policy itself speaks volumes. And that gets demonetized. They're like, nope, can't advertise on that. I mean, a straightforward analysis, but you see, the problem is YouTube doesn't want you to have a conservative viewpoint. It's got some kind of algorithm, I guess, where it decides, oh, she's conservative, she's capitalist, so therefore we're going to not allow her to have advertising on that platform. And so that's actually a pretty serious thing that's going on. They're trying to influence content, you see, in that way. They don't embrace all different viewpoints. And so my team has to go in, file a ticket, the video gets reviewed. They realize, oh yeah, you know, she really didn't actually say anything offensive or anything bad. And then they turn monetization back on. But what the heck is this, right? What is going on? I mean, basically, so what you'll see is thousands and thousands of views on something like this tonight. And then tomorrow morning, at some point, it'll reset, like back to 0. And they don't have all those views because they decide that it hasn't been viewed somehow. I mean, it's actually really and truly bizarre. And, you know, I've certainly had my share of, you know, experience, shall we say, with cancel culture. But this is really amazing to me. And then when I see what's happening to people on Twitter that are getting their accounts locked because they share a story that the New York Post reported, I would just say we're living in some pretty dangerous times, right? They are trampling on our First Amendment in pretty massive ways. They do not want any other voices being heard except for their own. And any other voice is about to get shut down. You know, let's go back to what happened there with Joe Biden, because 90 minutes goes by and somehow they don't think it's worth addressing the New York Post issue. Well, no, of course not, because, you know, who knows who's going to shut you down at that point? Who knows what advertisers are going to say? Who knows how much people are going to freak out? Again, why are they able to decide what's real, what's not? In other words, the New York Post is a pretty decent news organization. It had this story. Turns out the FBI, by the way, they had this thing like ages ago. Good to see all of you. I love that so many people join us from China. I love it. Really, really great. Yes, at least my channel is here. You're right. Tons of channels are getting wiped out. And, you know, look, we need to try and, I think, communicate however we can. But what is going on? I mean, who would have thought that we would be living in a time where you can't express your opinion? I mean, this is a constitutional right, okay? And they're trampling all over these rights. And I'm not okay with it. And I know you're not okay with it. And we need to make sure that we get the word out. So you know what? Like the video if you can, please. Make sure you go to TrishIntel.com. Do share this, because we need, I think, to be a voice. And by the way, that's how they wound up turning those Twitter accounts back on because enough people said, whoa, wait a second. I mean, the GOP Judiciary Committee, they weren't able to share this story. This is bizarre. I want to turn to another bizarre story because New York really is just turning into such a mess. I don't know if any of you are from that area. I know we have a few people joining us from New Jersey. But, look, the New York is clearly a mess. It's turning into basically a ghost town right now. Anyone who can is leaving. Everybody's leaving that city. No one wants to be there. And you know what? It's having a big effect on business, right? It's killing all those small mom and pop restaurants, all those small shops. Any small business owner is really feeling it. Big business owners are feeling it too. But it tends to hurt, when someone's really relying on that source of income. And yet, what did we see? A federal judge today ruled in favor of all of these restrictions and all of these guidelines that Governor Cuomo has put through in that city, even although the judge admits, and I quote, that it may turn New York City into a very different, even desolate place compared to how it was before the pandemic. Wow, like somehow this is all okay, at least in Michigan, right? The court said, okay, Governor, you can't pull that, Governor Whitmer. But here in New York, they're saying, go for it. So in this written opinion, again, that came out today, the federal judge explains that he's affording, quote, great deference to the governor's judgment. So when does the governor become king? When does the governor get to decide how people can make their livings or not? He writes, there is room for significant disagreement about the wisdom and efficacy of the governor's protective measures, but it is not the role of the courts to second guess the governor's approach. And yet, the judge admits that businesses are losing out due to these restrictions and says they will likely suffer irreparable harm. Who's looking out for individuals here? That's what I want to know. Where I grew up, there was a saying, live free or die. It was on every single license plate. If you know me well, you've heard me say this story before because it had such a big impact on me, really, as a kid growing up in New Hampshire. And there's something to that, right? You have to remember the individual. I know that big government thinks it knows what's best. It thinks it can get in there and tell us all how to live, and then we all have to stay home, all for the sake of overall safety for the good of society. But they're not really looking out for the good of society, because if you are, you're thinking about all the implications of all of this. You're thinking about the ripple effects. You're thinking about how else it affects society. And you gotta think about the individual. Bill Barr said the other day, and this was so important what he said in some remarks, that this was effectively the biggest infringement on our civil liberties. And in fact, it is. I want to know why it is that these lawmakers can't actually trust us a little bit more. Do you think anybody wants to get coronavirus? I don't think so. Okay, nobody actually wants it. Do you think businesses want to be responsible for having, created an environment that is hospitable to the virus? No, nobody wants that. So they need to actually trust the individuals. They need to trust the business owners to create a safe environment. It's so good, again, to have all of you here. It's really good to see. Yes, again, like the video, please, and spread the word, because they're doing what they can on these social media, YouTube included, to try and suppress these stories. And it's not right. I mean, we need to be heard. Everyone should have a voice here. I'm a big believer in diversity, and that includes intellectual diversity. The more points of view you hear, the better off you are as an individual. But they want to channel one point of view. And that point of view really increasingly is stomping all over our civil liberties. So somebody has to look out for our freedoms. We need to look out for each other. We need to look out for ourselves. And it's really good to have you here. Nick, good to have you in New York City. I hope it's bouncing back. I think it can. Did you see retail sales today? Retail sales numbers came in really, really good for September. More than twice what any economist had been anticipating. So it sort of tells you, right? It tells you that if they would just get out of the way, we actually can do what we know how to do. And Americans were out spending and they were out shopping. I mean, they were even buying clothes. in the month of September. So back to that. Now, they couldn't spend on travel. They couldn't really spend on concerts or sporting events or things like that. But we saw all other parts of spending start to pick up. And that tells you that really and truly, if government would just let us do our thing, that we would be better positioned. Thank you for saying I'm so sharp, and others. When they say that China owns Biden, I mean, that's a pretty big accusation. But what I think we're talking about overall here is this feeling that corporate America, right, is somehow in bed with the swamp. And so corporate America doesn't really care, shall we say, about, Tony, good to have you here. Cuomo has the highest, yes, Tony makes a very good point. Tony's saying that Cuomo has the highest number of deaths. He's been a total disaster. He has been. I mean, he basically is responsible, right, for so many people being sent into these nursing homes that had COVID-19, and he sent them to the most vulnerable of all vulnerable people, our elderly populations. And I was on his watch. And by the way, that was well into April that he was still doing that, when everybody knew full and well that you should not have anybody elderly near these COVID-19 carriers. Anyway, so that is on Cuomo. I agree. But, back to this idea that they really are, I think, treading on our liberties. Jim, thank you. It is better, right? It's better because I actually get to talk to you guys. It's a totally different experience, and I love it. I love it because I like to hear from you, and I know who my true, most loyal fans and supporters are. And one of the best things about this entire ordeal has been that I had no idea, really, because I hadn't communicated on some of these forums, how much of an outpouring there would be, and how generous and kind and supportive all of you would be. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you. And I'm not going anywhere. And you know what? I'll be as noisy as I want to be, because I can be. And there's no restrictions right now. I mean, I have to deal with the shadow banning and all of that. And we'll come up with some more innovative ways to address some of those problems. But it's good that you're here right now. And generally, I've found that when I go live, they can't shut that down. You saw me on Newsmax, Katie. Yes, I was on there with Chris Salado tonight. I had a lot of fun. I enjoy going on a lot of those programs. I'll be back on Monday as well. And I was on with Spicer and Lindsay just yesterday. Those guys are great. But again, I'll just remind you, listen to the podcast, because I'm doing it every single day, and you know how passionate I am, and you know how much I care, and I want to get that out. I want to get the word out, and you guys are a big part of that, really, because I think together, we can start to invoke change, and we can have a bigger voice together. So I'm starting this. I'm going live right here, and you're going to continue hearing from me regularly. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and share and spread the word and like the video, because we need truth, don't we? Just a quick reminder, I always read these. So even if I don't have a chance to call you out and thank you here personally, Jeff, yeah, a big issue. I agree. And Richard, thank you so much. I love that you love it. So thanks again, and have a wonderful evening, everyone. I'll see you back here soon.